My husband raised his champagne flute to toast our 7 years of marriage, his voice steady as he spun a tale of perfect domestic bliss. He truly believed I was still his clueless, compliant prop. I simply smiled and checked the time. I did not need to scream or make a scene. I just needed to wait exactly 3 minutes for those heavy atrium doors to open and let the ugly truth walk in. My name is Mara Whitfield. I am 36 years old, and for the last decade, I have built a career as a compliance and risk manager at Arborline Ethics and Risk here in Raleigh, North Carolina. My job is binary. There is compliance and there is non-compliance. There is truth and there is fraud. It is a discipline that requires a cold eye and the ability to detach emotion from evidence. It is a pity I did not apply those same professional standards to my own home until it was nearly too late. For 7 years, my marriage to Logan Whitfield has been a masterclass in public relations. To our neighbors in Hawthorne Ridge, we were the golden couple. Logan was the charming executive who always held the door, and I was the fortunate woman he adored, inside our walls. However, the dynamic was less a partnership and more a dictatorship disguised as benevolence. Logan did not yell. He did not hit. He simply eroded my reality with a patience that was almost impressive. He wrapped his control in concern, sliding insults between layers of affection like a razor blade hidden in an apple. He insisted on managing every cent of our finances. If I asked to see a bank statement or questioned a withdrawal, he would sigh, a sound of heavy, burdened love. "Mara, honey," he would say, his voice dropping to that patronizing register he reserved for me. "You know how anxious numbers make you. Why? Why would you want to burden yourself with this? You are just too sensitive for the stress of it." He made me believe I was fragile. He painted me as the hysterical wife, the woman who imagined slights and invented problems. Over time, even I began to believe that my gut instincts were actually symptoms of a disorder. So when he announced he wanted to throw a massive party for our 7th anniversary at the Glasswater Atrium, I nodded. He called it a celebration of our journey. I knew it was actually a marketing campaign. He needed to refresh the brand of our marriage. "It will be perfect," Logan told me over dinner, his eyes not on me but on the reflection of himself in the window. "A fresh start. Just you, me, and, well, everyone who matters." He wanted a spectacle. He wanted witnesses to his devotion. I was ready to play my part, the grateful wife standing in his shadow. That was the plan, at least. Until last Tuesday. That was the day I saw it. It was a digital ghost, a single line item in the trash folder of a shared email account I was never supposed to access. It was a payment confirmation for a medical procedure at a clinic in a neighboring county, a place I had never visited. He had deleted it, wiped the browser history, and scrubbed the cache. But in risk management, we know that nothing is ever truly gone. I did not scream. I did not confront him when he walked through the door that evening. I did not ask him who the patient was. Instead, I felt a sudden, icy clarity wash over me. The Mara who cried over his gaslighting died in that moment. In her place stood the risk manager. I established a new protocol. No confrontation without documentation. Emotion is a variable that leads to errors, and Logan was counting on me to be emotional. He was counting on me to be the crazy wife who makes accusations she cannot prove. He wanted a fight so he could dismiss me. I decided I would not give him a fight. I would give him an audit. For the last 3 weeks, I have been the model spouse. I smiled when he criticized my outfit. I thanked him when he made condescending jokes about my salary. I even took over the logistics for the anniversary party, assuring him that I wanted to take some of the load off his shoulders. He was relieved. He thought I was finally submitting completely. I sat at my desk, hand addressing the heavy cream envelopes. I wrote out the names of our friends, his colleagues, and the local elite. Then, with a steady hand, I addressed an envelope to a specific person who was definitely not on Logan's approved guest list. I sealed it and placed it in the pile with a sense of grim satisfaction. Logan thinks he is directing a play about a happy marriage. He thinks the climax will be his toast, his applause, his shining moment. He does not realize that I have rewritten the third act. I looked at the stack of invitations, ready for the post. I am not going to ruin the party. I am going to ruin the lie. Living with Logan was like living inside a meticulously curated exhibit where I was both the prized artifact and the clumsy tourist who might break something. To the outside world, he was the picture of the doting husband. At dinner parties, he would drape his arm heavily around my shoulders, squeezing just tight enough to be possessive rather than affectionate. He would raise his glass and look at our friends with that soft, practiced smile. "I do not know where I would be without Mara," he would say, his voice thick with performative gratitude. She is my absolute rock." The guests would coo and smile at me, thinking I was the luckiest woman in North Carolina. But the moment the car door closed after the party, the temperature in the vehicle would drop 20 degrees. He would not yell. He would just sigh, a long, disappointed sound that sucked the air out of the cabin. "You were a little loud tonight. Mara," he would say, keeping his eyes on the road. "And that story about your work project, it was boring everyone. I could see their eyes glazing over. I wish you had a bit more social awareness, for my sake." He chipped away at me like that, day after day, until I stopped speaking unless spoken to. He managed our social circle with the same ruthless efficiency. If I tried to make plans with friends, they would look at me with pitying eyes. Eventually, I found out why. Logan had been planting seeds for years. He would meet them for coffee or drinks and lower his voice to a whisper. "Mara is she is going through a really hard time right now," he would tell them. "She is so stressed and, well, unstable. Please, just be patient with her." He isolated me by making me a project, a charity case that everyone was too polite to confront. This control extended to every corner of our lives. When I asked about refinancing the house or updating our life insurance, he shut me down with a wave of his hand. He changed the passwords to our investment accounts, claiming it was for security after a data breach he had invented. "You do not need to worry your pretty head about interest rates," he would say, patting my hand as if I were a child. I handled it. "You just focus on getting better." His favorite pastime, however, was the public joke at my expense. Last month, we were out with 3 other couples at a steakhouse. I reached for the breadbasket, and Logan chuckled, loud enough for the whole table to hear. "Careful there, honey," he said, winking at his best friend. "We are trying to fit into that anniversary dress, aren't we? You know how you get when you feel heavy?" The table went silent for a second, then erupted in uncomfortable laughter because Logan was smiling. If I got angry, I was the one ruining the mood. If I stayed silent, I accepted the insult. It was a trap he set perfectly every time. I began to notice a pattern. Whenever I brought up a discrepancy in our budget or asked why cash withdrawals were happening at ATMs near his office, he would not answer the question. He would flip the script. "Are you checking up on me?" he would ask, his face twisting into a mask of hurt. This is that paranoia again. "Mara, have you been taking your medication, I think? I think you need to see Dr. Evans again." "You are imagining things." He turned legitimate financial questions into questions about my sanity. It was brilliant. It was evil. And he kept his secrets physically close to him. I stared often at his keychain. Amidst the car fob and the house keys, there was a small silver key that opened the biometric safe in his home office. He never put it down. He took it into the shower. He slept with it on the nightstand. I was never allowed to touch it. I used to tell myself that keeping the peace was the most important thing. I thought that if I just stayed quiet, if I just absorbed his criticism and let him have his way, the marriage would survive. I was a fool. I realized now that my silence was not keeping the peace. It was giving him permission. My silence was the currency he used to buy his double life. I looked down at the anniversary invitation on my desk. It was heavy cardstock, cream with gold lettering. Logan and Mara Whitfield celebrate 7 years of love. It did not look like an invitation to a party. It looked like a death certificate for the marriage I thought I had. I ran my thumb over the raised lettering of his name. He wanted a celebration. I would give him a reckoning. It started with digital refuse. Most people assume that when they hit delete, the data vanishes into the ether, but I know better. Late one Tuesday night, while Logan was asleep, I logged into our shared household email account to check a utility bill. On a whim, I clicked on the trash folder. It was mostly spam and old newsletters, but one subject line caught my eye because of the date. It was from yesterday. Yet, I had not seen it in the inbox. I opened it. It was a payment confirmation from the Willow Ridge Women's Center, a clinic located 3 counties away. The amount was $450. My eyes scanned the payment method. It had been drawn from our joint emergency fund. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. This was the same fund Logan had declared sacred territory. Mara, you must never, never touch this money. He had told me once, his voice stern. It is for life and death situations only. If you touch it for your little impulses, we will be destitute. He had used our life and death money for a gynecological clinic visit that definitely did not involve me. I did not gasp. I did not cry. I took a screenshot. I uploaded the image to a secure, encrypted folder on my personal work cloud, a place Logan could not access even if he had the technical skills, which he did not. Then, I carefully marked the email as unread and moved it back to the trash folder, exactly where he had left it. To him, the digital landscape remained undisturbed. I switched tabs and opened our calendar. I began cross-referencing dates. The clinic visit coincided with a supposed overnight client meeting in Charlotte. I went back further. 3 months ago, a withdrawal of $200 matched a seminar in D.C. 6 months ago, a hotel charge in Charleston matched a team-building retreat. The pattern was so obvious it was insulting. He was not just cheating. He was sloppy. But the real shock came when I pulled my own credit report. I authorized the inquiry, my heart hammering a slow, heavy rhythm against my ribs. There, at the bottom of the list of open accounts, was a Visa card I had never applied for. It had been opened 6 months ago. With the billing address listed as a post office box in downtown Raleigh, I clicked on the transaction history. It was a catalog of a lifestyle I was not living. $400 at a day spa, $300 at a lingerie boutique, $1,200 at a luxury hotel. Logan had stolen my identity to fund his affair. He was destroying my credit score to buy another woman's silk and champagne. You bastard, I whispered to the empty room, my voice trembling not with sadness, but with the adrenaline of the hunt. I did not hack his private email. I did not try to guess the passcode to his phone. In my line of work, we call that the fruit of the poisonous tree. If I obtained evidence illegally, a good lawyer could get it thrown out in a divorce hearing. I needed clean kills. I needed evidence that was legally mine to see. The emergency fund was joint. The credit card was in my name. Every screenshot, every downloaded statement was entirely lawful. I opened a new note on my tablet and started a timeline. I logged every date, every location, and every dollar amount. It looked less like a diary and more like a forensic audit report. I was building a case file. Then, the final piece fell into my lap. Our home devices were set to sync photos automatically when connected to the Wi-Fi. Logan usually turned this feature off on his phone, but he must have forgotten to disable it on his tablet. I opened the gallery and saw a stream of mundane photos, a picture of a lunch receipt, a screenshot of a map, and then one accidental capture. It was a photo taken inside a clinical examination room, likely meant to be a picture of a pamphlet or a document on the counter. But the angle was off. It caught the reflection in the glass cabinet door. I zoomed in. There was Logan, looking concerned, leaning forward. And next to him, reflected clearly enough to be undeniable, was a woman. She was blonde, younger than me, and her hand was resting on her stomach, on her finger. She wore a ring. It was not a wedding band. It was a promise ring, a large, gaudy thing that sparkled in the harsh fluorescent light. I stared at the image. He was playing the supportive partner for her, in a room usually reserved for expectant mothers, while paying for it with the money he told me was for our survival. I saved the photo to my secure drive. The timeline was complete. I had the who, the when, and the how much. Now, I just needed to prepare the stage for the why. I did not call my mother. I did not call a therapist to cry about my broken heart. I called Kira Maddox. We had been roommates in college, and while I went into risk management, Kira had become a senior paralegal at a family law firm known for dismantling high-net-worth husbands. She answered on the second ring, and I could hear the hum of her office in the background. "Mara," she said, her voice dropping instantly when I told her what I had found. "Listen to me very carefully. You are not a wife right now. You are a client. Do not scream at him. Do not throw a vase. Do not post a cryptic quote on social media. I won't," I said, my voice steady. "Good," Kira continued, the sound of her typing furiously filling the silence. "And absolutely no alcohol at that party. You need to be sober when the hammer drops. And Mara, do not sign anything. If he hands you a birthday card, you have a lawyer read it first. I hired the lawyer Kira recommended, a woman named Simone Hart who reportedly terrified judges in 3 counties. Simone's instructions were counterintuitive but strict. You stay in the house. Simone told me during our encrypted video call. It is going to be hell, but if you pack a bag and leave, he can claim abandonment. He can change the locks and paint you as the wife who walked out on her family. You sleep in the guest room if you have to, but you stay under that roof until we have a court order. I followed her advice like it was a standard operating procedure for a compliance audit. That afternoon, I walked into a bank across town where Logan had no footprint and opened a new account in my name only. Then, I executed the transfer. I moved exactly 50% of our joint savings into the new account. Not a penny more, not a penny less. If I took it all, a judge could view it as malicious theft. By taking exactly half, I was simply securing my marital share. Next came the firewall. I contacted all 3 credit bureaus and froze my reports. I enabled 2-factor authentication on every account I owned, changing the recovery email to a new, secure address Logan did not know existed. I watched the digital walls go up around my identity, feeling the first true sense of safety I had felt in years. Then, I set the soft trap. I needed Logan compliant and arrogant. I needed him to believe his gaslighting was working. I sent him a text message while he was at work. "Honey, I have been thinking about what you said. You are right. We need this fresh start. I want the anniversary party to be perfect." He replied within 30 seconds with a heart emoji. He thought he had won. He thought I was back in my box. With Logan's guard down, I made my most aggressive move yet. I looked at the guest list for the party again. There was a glaring omission in Logan's professional circle. He had invited his sycophants and his boss, but he had notably excluded the new head of internal control at his company, a man who had been asking uncomfortable questions about expense reports lately. I found the man's work email and sent a formal invitation, styled as a personal request from the proud wife who wanted to celebrate her husband's hard work. I knew he would come. Auditors are naturally curious people. Finally, Simone prepared the document that would act as the nail in the coffin. It was a preservation notice, a legal demand requiring Logan and his company to preserve all electronic records, texts, and emails. We would not serve it yet. We would wait until the perfect moment. I sat back in my chair and looked at the meticulously organized file on my desk. Logan thought this party was his production. a show where he played the hero and I played the supporting role. He had no idea that the script had been changed. If he wants to act, I will build the stage, but I am the director. The psychological warfare began before I even finished my morning coffee. I woke up to a phone that was vibrating incessantly on the nightstand. It was not an alarm, but a barrage of notifications. I opened social media and saw it immediately. Logan had posted a picture of me from a few weeks ago, taken when I was recovering from the flu, looking pale and disheveled. The caption was a masterpiece of manipulative fiction. "Please keep my beautiful wife Mara in your prayers." It read, "We are navigating a difficult mental health crisis right now. It is hard to watch the woman you love lose her grip on reality, but I am standing by her. Love is patience." He had tagged everyone, my mother, my colleagues, our neighbors. Within minutes, the messages of support flooded my inbox. People I had not spoken to in years were texting me things like, "Thinking of you and let Logan take care of you." They thought they were being kind, but they were actually unknowingly participating in his smear campaign. He was planting the narrative that I was unstable so that when I finally spoke the truth, everyone would view it as the ravings of a sick woman. I did not reply to a single message. I did not post a defense. In crisis management, we know that engaging with a false narrative often only validates it. I let the silence hang there. I let them wonder why I was not thanking them. My silence was not a symptom of depression. It was a strategic void that I let Logan fill with his own anxiety. That evening, Logan came home with a leather folder tucked under his arm. He poured 2 glasses of wine and sat down opposite me, wearing his most concerned expression. "Mara, sweetheart," he began, sliding the folder across the marble island. "I have been speaking with some specialists about how to best protect our future. With your current state, I think it is best if we sign a post-nuptial agreement, just to safeguard the assets so you do not have to worry about managing them." I opened the document. It was formatted to look like standard legal boilerplate, but the clauses were predatory. It required me to sign over all control of our joint investments to Logan as the primary steward, and, more damningly, included a clause where I acknowledged my history of emotional instability. It was not an agreement. It was a confession. I read the last page, looked up at him, and nodded slowly. He smiled, reaching for a pen. "I knew you would be sensible," he said. I stood up, walked over to the tall stainless steel trash can, stepped on the pedal, and dropped the entire document into the garbage. Then I let the lid slam shut. The smile vanished from Logan's face. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. The benevolent husband was gone. You think you can just play games with me?" he hissed, stepping into my personal space. "I am trying to help you. If you do not sign that, I will have you declared incompetent. I have the doctors. I have the witnesses. I will take power of attorney. Mara, and you will be left with nothing but a hospital gown." His voice was low and venomous, a weapon designed to terrify. But he did not know that I had already moved the money. He did not know his power was an illusion. "You should check the accounts." "Logan," I said quietly. He froze. "What?" "The joint savings," I said, taking a sip of my water. "You should check them." He did not ask if I was okay. He did not ask why I was doing this. The mask of the concerned husband disintegrated completely. "What? What did you do?" he stammered, his face draining of color. "Who did you send money to?" "If you touched that money." "It is interesting," I interrupted, my voice devoid of emotion. "You are not worried about my sanity anymore. You are worried about the balance." He scrambled for his phone, his fingers trembling as he tried to log into the banking app. I watched him panic. It was a revelation. For years, I thought Logan just wanted to cheat on me. But as I watched him hyperventilate over the missing funds, I realized the truth was far colder. He was not just having an affair. He had opened credit cards in my name, drained our emergency fund, and tried to trick me into signing away my rights because he was executing a long-term liquidation of my life. He intended to leave me bankrupt and institutionalized while he started over with Sloan. He looked up from his phone, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and fear. You stole half, he whispered. I took what was mine. I replied. He stared at me, and for the first time, I saw him calculate the cost of attacking me versus the cost of placating me. He needed that party. He needed the social cover. We have the anniversary party on Saturday, he said, his voice shaking. Do not think you can ruin it. I looked at the invitation on the counter. He still thought the party was about us. He did not realize that he had set the stage not for a celebration, but for a public exchange. He intended to show the world his sick wife before discarding her for the healthy younger model. He wanted to swap us out in front of an audience. I would not miss it for the world. I said, and I meant it. It did not take long to put a name to the face in the reflection. I ran the image through a basic reverse search and cross-referenced it with the guest lists of the charity galas Logan had attended over the last 2 years. Her name was Sloan Mercer. She was a freelance event director, the kind of woman who made a career out of spending other people's money on flower arrangements and champagne towers. There were no children in her social media feed, no family photos, just endless selfies at high-end venues. This was not a story about a broken home or innocent kids caught in the crossfire. This was a story about 2 adults conspiring to commit grand larceny against my life. Once I had her name, the financial web Logan had spun became clearer. I dove back into the records, specifically looking at the accounts for the community outreach program Logan managed. It was a small nonprofit fund attached to his company, meant to help local families. What I found made my stomach turn, not from heartbreak, but from professional disgust. There were dozens of transactions labeled miscellaneous expenses, or consulting fees. $300 here, $500 there. They were small enough to avoid triggering an automatic audit flag, but cumulative enough to fund a lifestyle. He was siphoning money from a charity to pay for Sloane's apartment lease and her designer wardrobe. He was stealing from the needy to subsidize his mistress. Then came the slip-up. Logan was usually careful, but arrogance breeds complacency. A forwarded email chain landed in our joint inbox, likely a mistake made while he was toggling between accounts on his phone. It was from Sloan to Logan. I cannot wait for Saturday. When exactly do you go public at the anniversary? I need to know when to walk in so the timing is dramatic. I stared at the screen. They had a script. They were not just planning to run away together. They were planning to stage a takeover of my life at the party. I kept digging. I called a local jeweler where we had an account, pretending to be checking on an order. I am calling about the ring under the initials L.W., I said, keeping my voice light and breezy. Oh, yes. Mrs. Whitfield, the sales associate replied, clearly confused. We have it ready. But the contact number on the order is different. We have been texting updates to a Miss Mercer. That is his assistant, I lied smoothly. She is handling the surprise. Just keep doing what you are doing. I hung up. He had bought an engagement ring while still married to me, using a contact number that belonged to his mistress to keep me in the dark. The evidence was overwhelming, but I needed a hammer, not just a scalpel. I reached out to the head of internal control at Logan's company. I knew he had been sniffing around Logan's department for months, but lacked the smoking gun. I found him on a secure messaging app linked to his professional profile and sent a single, calculated sentence. I think you should look at the gala logistics line item for last month. His reply came within 3 minutes. It was not a question. It was a validation. I knew it. I just needed someone to say it. Thank you. He did not ask who I was, though he probably guessed. He just needed a direction to look. By pointing him there, I had ensured that Logan would not just be facing a divorce, he would be facing an embezzlement investigation. I compiled everything onto a USB drive, the screenshots of the texts, the timeline of the bank transfers, the photo of the ring order, and the email about going public. I encrypted the drive and placed it in my purse. As I sat there in the dim light of my home office, the final piece of Logan's strategy clicked into place. I thought back to the post-nuptial agreement he tried to force me to sign, the one that declared me emotionally unstable. I thought about the social media posts asking for prayers for my mental health. It hit me with the force of a physical blow. Logan did not just want to leave me. If he simply divorced me, I would get half the assets and alimony. He did not want to share. He wanted to destroy my credibility so he could claim I was incompetent. If he could prove I was mentally unfit, he could gain power of attorney, control our assets, and keep everything for himself and Sloan while I was packed off to a treatment facility. He was not just an adulterer. He was a predator. You think you can just erase me? I whispered to the empty room. I looked at the clock. The anniversary party was 24 hours away. He had his script, and he had his ring. But he had forgotten one thing. In a story about crime and punishment, the person holding the evidence is the one who decides the ending. I was not the victim he thought he was crushing. I was the witness who was about to take the stand. The guest list was not a social register. It was a jury pool. I spent the morning finalizing the seating chart with the precision of a battlefield commander. I placed Logan's college friends, the ones who had helped spread the rumors about my instability, right near the front. I wanted them to have a front row seat to their own humiliation. I placed his direct supervisor and 2 key board members at table 4, ensuring they had a clear line of sight to the podium. And then I added the name that would make Logan sweat if he had a conscience, which I knew he did not. The internal auditor from his company. I put him at a table in the back, obscured by a large floral arrangement, so Logan would not spot him until it was too late. I called the venue manager at the Glasswater Atrium to confirm the security protocols. We have some high-profile donors attending from the company. I told him, lying with the ease of a woman who had nothing left to lose. I need a dedicated camera feed of the main stage area. It is for liability purposes. Of course, Mrs. Whitfield, the manager replied. We will have the feed running to the cloud server from 6 o'clock onwards. I hung up. I now had my witnesses and my documentation. Next, I needed to disarm the target. I picked up my phone and sent Logan a text message. Honey, I just want you to be proud of me tonight. I promise I will be on my best behavior. It was the kind of submissive, pleading text he loved. It fed his ego. It confirmed his narrative that I was a broken woman trying to claw my way back into his good graces. He replied with a thumbs-up emoji. It was dismissive, arrogant, and perfect. My phone buzzed. It was Kira. Remember the rules, she said, her voice sharp and urgent. Let him speak. Do not interrupt him, no matter what he says. If he lies, let him lie. An unsolicited public confession is stronger than any affidavit I can draft. We need him to feel safe enough to be cruel. I know. I said, I am ready. And the recording Kira asked. App is open. I confirmed. Microphone sensitivity is set to high. I slid the phone into the hidden pocket of my dress. It was recording already, capturing the silence of the empty house. But I had one more invitation to send, one that Kira did not know about. I opened a burner email account and composed a message to Sloan Mercer. I formatted it to look like a confidential VIP instruction from the event coordination team. Miss Mercer, per Mr. Whitfield's request, please arrive at 8:30. He wants you to make a grand entrance near the stage. It is time. I hit send. I was not just inviting his mistress. I was directing her. I wanted her to walk in with the confidence of a woman who thought she had already won. I wanted her to shine so bright that her fall would be blinding. Finally, I prepared a single thick manila envelope. I did not put it in my purse. I placed it on the small table by the front door, ready to be handed to the courier I had hired to arrive at the venue at a precise moment. Inside were the copies of the bank transfers, the credit card fraud report, and the timeline. It was not for me. It was for the man who would walk through the doors when the clock struck the half hour. I stood in the foyer, checking my reflection. I looked calm. I looked like the perfect corporate wife. My heart was beating a slow, steady rhythm against my ribs. The trap was set. The players were moving into position. All I had to do now was walk onto the stage and wait for Logan to hand me the knife. I stood before the full-length mirror in the guest bedroom. The dress was a deep, midnight blue, tailored with architectural precision. I had not chosen it for its aesthetic appeal or to solicit a compliment from my husband. I chose it because the fabric was stiff enough to conceal the outline of my smartphone in the hidden pocket, and the neckline was high enough to hide the flush of adrenaline that might rise to my throat. I adjusted the device, ensuring the microphone was unobstructed. I was not dressing for a gala. I was dressing for a deposition. Logan always hated my practical nature. He used to sigh when I insisted on reading the fine print of a contract or checking the weather before a trip. You do not know how to have fun, Mara, he would say, shaking his head as if my prudence was a personal defect. You suck the air out of the room. I realized now that he did not hate that I was boring. He hated that I was observant. He was afraid of my ability to see the cracks in the facade he spent so much energy polishing. He wanted a wife who would drink the champagne and ignore the lipstick stain on the collar. He wanted an accessory, not a partner. My phone buzzed against my hip. The screen flashed with the name Patricia, my mother-in-law. She was calling 3 hours before the party, a strategic time to gauge my emotional state. She wanted to know if I was cracking so she could warn Logan. I answered on the second ring, keeping my voice level and calm. Hello, Patricia. Mara, dear, she began, her voice dripping with that cloying, artificial sweetness she reserved for difficult situations. I just wanted to check on you. Logan told me you have been having a rough week. Are you sure you are up for tonight? We can make an excuse if you are feeling fragile. She was fishing for a soundbite, a sob, a shout, anything she could repeat to the family to prove I was unhinged. I am wonderful, Patricia, I replied, staring at my calm reflection in the mirror. I have never felt more clear-headed. We will see you there. I hung up before she could pivot. I denied her the evidence she sought. A moment later, a text arrived from Simone, my attorney. The fraud report and the civil complaint are printed and ready. The process server is on standby. If he crosses the line, we pull the trigger. I walked into the hallway and stopped in front of a framed photo from our wedding day. It was taken 7 years ago. Logan looked triumphant. I looked adoring. For a long time, I thought that look in his eyes was love. Now, viewing it through the lens of a risk audit, I saw it for what it was. It was the look of a man who had secured an asset. I was his shield, my clean record, my good credit, my respectable job. I was the cover story that allowed him to play his games in the dark. I took a deep breath. There would be no scene tonight. I would not throw a drink in his face. I would not scream at his mistress. I would not give the guests the reality show drama they secretly craved. That is the amateur way. That is the emotional reaction of a wife. I was approaching this as a creditor coming to collect a debt. I checked the time. The courier was scheduled. The internal auditor was confirmed. The camera feed was live. I did not need luck, and I did not need karma. I had logistics. I turned away from the photo and walked toward the door. I did not need to win a fight. I just needed him to say the word her in front of a crowd. The glasswater atrium was suffocatingly beautiful. Amber lights reflected off the floor-to-ceiling windows, and a jazz quartet played a soft, unobtrusive melody in the corner. The room was filled with the low hum of expensive conversation and the clinking of crystal. To the 60 guests present, this was a celebration of longevity. To me, it was a crime scene waiting for the yellow tape. Logan was in his element. He moved from table to table, his hand resting possessively on the small of my back, just long enough to perform the role of the devoted husband before sliding away to charm a potential donor. He told anecdotes that were carefully calibrated to make him look saintly and me look incompetent. "You know how Mara gets," he said to a group of our neighbors, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She worries about everything. I have to. I have to carry the load for both of us most days. It is exhausting, but, well, that is marriage. Right?" The neighbors nodded sympathetically, casting pitying glances my way. I sat perfectly still. I smiled at the right moments. I took small sips of my water. I was the silent, unstable wife he had painted me to be. I was letting him build his tower of lies as high as possible so the collapse would be spectacular. Then, the doors opened, and Sloane Mercer walked in. I had timed her arrival perfectly. She was wearing a silver dress that was far too bridal for an anniversary party that was not hers. She did not hesitate. She walked straight toward the head table, her eyes locked on Logan. The chatter in the room faltered. People noticed. The internal auditor at table 9 adjusted his glasses. My mother-in-law, Patricia, frowned, sensing a shift in the atmospheric pressure. Sloane stopped just a few inches from Logan, invading his personal space in a way that screamed intimacy. Logan did not step back. Instead, he turned to the microphone stand at the center of the stage. He tapped the mic twice. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," Logan began, his voice thick with emotion. Tonight was supposed to be a celebration of 7 years, but, well, tonight needs to be about truth. He looked down at the floor, then up at the audience, practicing the pauses he must have rehearsed in the mirror. "These last few years have been incredibly hard," he continued. "I have stood by Mara through her episodes. I have tried to be the rock she needed during her mental health crisis. I have given everything to keep this family afloat while she drifted away from reality." A ripple of uneasy murmuring moved through the crowd. He was publicly diagnosing me. He was stripping me of my dignity in front of my boss, my friends, and his colleagues. "But a man can only take so much darkness," Logan said, his voice gaining strength. "Sometimes you have to choose light. Sometimes you have to choose survival." He turned to Sloane and extended his hand. She stepped up onto the riser, beaming like she was accepting an award. The guests were frozen. This was not social awkwardness. This was social horror. "Sloane has been my sanctuary," Logan declared, holding her hand in both of his. He turned back to me, looking me dead in the eye. "Mara, I tried. I really did. But I deserve a love that is easy. I deserve a love that breathes." He released Sloane's hand, reached into his jacket pocket, and pulled out a velvet box. The room gasped. It was a sound of collective shock, a vacuum of air leaving 60 pairs of lungs at once. He got down on one knee. "Sloane Mercer," he said, his voice echoing off the glass walls. "Will you marry me and help me start the life I should have had?" Sloane brought her hands to her mouth, feigning surprise for a moment she had helped plan. She nodded vigorously. "Yes," she whispered into the mic. "Yes, finally." Logan stood up and slipped the ring onto her finger. He looked out at the crowd, expecting applause. He expected them to see this as a romantic triumph, a brave man breaking free from his crazy wife. Instead, there was a deafening, stunned silence. I stood up. My chair scraped harsh and loud against the floor. Every eye in the room swiveled to me. I did not look broken. I did not look like the unstable woman Logan had described. I picked up my champagne glass. "Congratulations," I said, my voice clear and projecting to the back of the room without a microphone. You really chose the perfect moment." Logan's smile faltered. He looked confused by my composure. I turned my head slowly and looked toward the main entrance. "Now," I whispered. The heavy oak doors of the atrium swung open with a sound that cracked through the room like a gavel striking a block. The noise severed the tension, cutting off the murmurs of the confused guests and freezing Logan's triumphant smile in place. He looked toward the entrance, annoyed at the interruption, expecting perhaps a waiter with more champagne. Instead, two men in dark suits stepped into the light. One was a stranger, clutching a thick stack of paperwork. The other was the head of internal control from Logan's company, the man I had emailed about the gala logistics. They walked down the center aisle with the synchronized, purposeful stride of executioners. The stranger stopped at the foot of the stage and looked up at my husband, who was still holding the microphone in one hand and Sloane's trembling hand in the other. "Logan Whitfield," the man asked, his voice projecting clearly to the back of the room. "This is a private event," Logan stammered, his face losing its flush of victory. "You need to leave. My wife is having a breakdown, and we are handling it." "I am not here for your wife," the man said, extending his arm. "I am here for you. You are being served." He thrust the papers toward Logan. My husband did not take them, so the man dropped them at his feet. They fanned out on the stage floor, white sheets glaring under the spotlight. "That is a notice of a civil lawsuit regarding identity theft, credit card fraud, and spousal fiduciary breach," the process server announced, ensuring the investors at Table 4 heard every syllable. "And this is a temporary restraining order freezing all assets pending a forensic accounting audit." Logan went pale. It was a physical transformation, the blood draining from his face as the words identity theft hung in the air. He looked at the internal auditor standing next to the server. Frank Logan asked, his voice cracking. "Frank, tell him to leave. Tell him this is a misunderstanding." Frank did not blink. He adjusted his glasses and spoke with the cold, sterile tone of corporate policy. "Mr. Whitfield, as of 5 minutes ago, your access to the company servers has been revoked," Frank said. "We have launched a formal investigation into the misappropriation of funds from the Community Outreach Program, specifically regarding the charity gala logistics expenses. You are placed on immediate administrative leave. Do not return to the office." The silence in the room was absolute. The guests were no longer looking at me with pity. They were looking at Logan with the dawning realization that they were witnessing a felony in real time. Sloane snatched her hand away from Logan as if he were burning hot. She looked at the process server, then at the company representative, her eyes wide with panic. "Logan," she shrieked, her voice shrill and terrified. You said I was safe. You said the money was yours." A gasp went through the room. With one sentence, the blushing bride-to-be had confirmed she was an accomplice. She was not a victim of love. She was a beneficiary of theft. Logan turned to the crowd, sweat beading on his forehead. He raised the microphone, desperate to reclaim the narrative. "She is lying," he yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Mara is doing this. She is sick. She is paranoid. None of this is real." I walked forward. I did not run. I did not shout. I approached the edge of the stage where the papers lay scattered. I placed my final envelope on the table next to the abandoned engagement ring box. Inside was the undeniable timeline, the reflection photo from the clinic, and the bank statements showing the transfers to Sloane's accounts. On the front of the envelope, in my handwriting, was a simple note, preponderance, not poetry. "It is not paranoia when you have the receipts. Logan," I said. He looked down at me, his eyes full of hate, mouth opening to launch another insult. But the weight of the moment crushed him. The investors were already on their phones. The neighbors were turning their backs. His mother, Patricia, was weeping silently into her napkin. I looked at him one last time, then shifted my gaze to Sloane, who was now sobbing and trying to hide her face from the cameras I had installed. "You proposed to her with my honor," I said, my voice low and steady. "I just came to get my name back." I turned around and walked down the center aisle. The path cleared for me. I could hear Logan shouting something incoherent behind me, but his voice sounded small, swallowed by the cavernous room and the massive weight of the truth. I pushed past the heavy doors and stepped out into the cool night air. I still held my glass of champagne. I did not drink it. I placed it on a ledge outside, leaving the celebration behind. I did not need to toast. The silence of his destruction was applause enough. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please drop a comment below and share your thoughts on Logan's downfall. If you enjoyed this revenge drama, please make sure to subscribe to the Victoria Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach even more people.